computer whiz kid destroy an $800 million defense contract because he thought my classified contact network was outdated security theater. I'm Maxwell Rivers, 48 years old, and I spent 25 years building relationships that this kid torched in about 25 minutes. The conference room on the 15th floor of Blackstone Defense Solutions always smelled the same: coffee, leather chairs, and that particular scent of government contracts changing hands. I'd been breathing that air for 15 years after my decade in the Air Force, working my way up to Senior Director of Defense Relations. When Pentagon brass wanted to move serious hardware, they called me first. See, most people think defense contracts happen in spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations. That's amateur hour. Real defense business happens in secure facilities, over bourbon and officers' clubs, and in conversations that start with, "Remember when we served together in..." Learned this from my old squadron commander, Colonel Davis, who taught me that trust from the right person was worth more than a 100-page security clearance from the wrong one. That Tuesday morning, I was standing by my office window reviewing my secured contact files for the biggest deal of my career, $800 million. General Pierce Morgan wanted to sell his defense consulting firm's satellite technology division to us, and I'd spent 8 months building that relationship, not through emails or video calls, but the old-fashioned way: face-to-face meetings at the Pentagon Officers Club, rounds of golf at Andrews Air Force Base, and long dinners where we talked about everything except business until the coffee arrived. Morgan Defense Technologies wasn't just another acquisition target. This was 30 years of military innovation built from Pierce's expertise as a former Pentagon procurement officer. He'd survived budget cuts in the 90s, modernized satellite communications during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and built a $1.2 billion consulting empire. But he was 65 now, ready to retire, and he wanted to find the right buyer before the next administration changed defense priorities. The key wasn't the $800 million price tag. The key was understanding what Pierce really wanted: respect for his military legacy, assurance that his classified work would remain in American hands, and guarantees that his 200 veteran employees wouldn't be thrown out for efficiency improvements. These weren't line items in a contract. They were promises built on trust between people who'd worn the uniform. I had all of that trust documented the only way that mattered in defense contracting: in my personal relationship with Pierce, in secured notes from our conversations, and in my classified contact database that contained 25 years of carefully cultivated military and government contacts. Phone numbers that weren't listed anywhere online, private military extensions written on challenge coins, from bases around the world, direct lines to people who made decisions worth billions in national security. That's when the door slammed open. Jordan Hayes walked in like he owned the place, which technically his daddy did. His father was VP of operations. This kid was 25, fresh out of MIT with a computer science degree that probably cost more than my annual salary. Designer jeans, $400 sneakers, smartwatch, and that particular brand of arrogance that comes from never having to serve anything bigger than yourself. It was his first week on the job as executive assistant to the VP, and he was already trying to revolutionize everything. "Excuse me," he said, not even looking at me. He was staring at my secure workstation with the expression you'd use to examine a rotary phone. I closed my classified folders. "Can I help you, Jordan?" "Yeah, you can help me understand why we're still running classified operations like it's 1985. He pointed at my secured contact system, the same encrypted database I'd been building since my first day at the company. "What is that ancient setup?" "That's my classified client database," I said calmly. "Your what?" He actually laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound that carried across the secure floor. A few analysts looked up from their computers. "Dude, we have enterprise cloud systems. We have AI-driven CRM platforms. We have blockchain-secured everything. Why are you keeping handwritten notes and personal contacts like some kind of Cold War relic?" I looked at this kid in his designer clothes and his complete ignorance of how classified defense work actually operated. "Because some relationships can't be digitized, Jordan. When General Morgan calls me at midnight about a problem with satellite encryption protocols, he's not talking to a database entry. He's talking to someone he served with, someone he trusts." "Trust?" Jordan scoffed. "This is 2024, not 1984. Everything needs to be in the enterprise cloud. accessible to the team, trackable. Through analytics, you're creating security vulnerabilities with this personal network garbage. It's inefficient and frankly dangerous from a data security standpoint. The room went completely quiet. Junior analysts stopped typing. Project managers froze mid-conversation. This wasn't just a discussion anymore. It was a public challenge. "Jordan," I said, keeping my voice level but letting just a hint of steel creep in. "I'm meeting with General Morgan tomorrow to finalize an $800 million acquisition. This personal network is why he chose to sell to us instead of our 5 competitors who've been courting him for 2 years. His face turned red. He wasn't used to pushback, especially not from someone his father's generation. "I'm implementing digital transformation initiatives across all departments. You need to transfer all your contacts to the central enterprise system immediately and eliminate these outdated security protocols. That's a direct order." "Direct order?" I said slowly. "From who?" "From me. I'm the VP's executive assistant, and I'm modernizing this company whether people like it or not." "No. Just like that. No explanation, no negotiation, no corporate speak. The kid wanted to play authority games, but he'd picked the wrong opponent." "Excuse me?" he said. "No. I have classified work to do." That's when he completely lost his mind. "You're fired." The words echoed in the secure facility like a gunshot. Everyone froze. You could hear the air conditioning humming, secure printers processing, and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. I turned around slowly and looked at Jordan's sweaty, triumphant face. "You want to repeat that? You're insubordinate and resistant to necessary change," he said, his voice cracking but getting louder. "You're blocking progress and refusing to follow direct orders from corporate leadership. Pack your things. Security will escort you out." I looked at this kid who had just made the biggest mistake of his short, privileged life. He thought firing the project lead one day before the biggest deal in company history would make him look strong and decisive. He had no idea he'd just pulled the pin on a grenade that wouldn't explode until he was standing right next to it. "Okay," I said. He blinked. He was expecting a fight. Maybe some begging, certainly some dramatic resistance. Instead, I secured my classified files, straightened my tie, and headed for my office. "That's it?" he called after me. "No argument?" "Jordan," I said without turning around, "you're absolutely right. Security protocols are important. I'll clear my workspace immediately. Here's what this 25-year-old computer science graduate didn't understand about my contact network. It wasn't just information. It was 25 years of relationships built one handshake at a time. Military contacts that weren't listed in any directory. Private government numbers written on the backs of unit challenge coins from deployments around the world. Direct lines to people who made decisions worth billions in national security, scribbled on napkins during conversations that mattered. More importantly, it was trust. When you've sat in a forward operating base at 3 a.m. with a fellow officer listening to him talk about his concerns for America's defense posture, you're not just professional contacts anymore. You're something rarer in the defense world. You're brothers in service. My office was controlled chaos of 25 years' worth of relationship building. Unlike the sterile minimalism of the main floor, my workspace was covered with unit patches, photos from military ceremonies, and business cards from people who didn't advertise their services because they didn't need to. There was the engraved challenge coin General Morgan had given me after we closed a smaller contract 2 years ago. A bottle of 15-year bourbon from a Lockheed executive whose unit had served alongside mine in Afghanistan. A signed photo from a Pentagon procurement officer who'd introduced me to Pierce in the first place. But the real asset was that classified contact system. Every entry represented hours of shared service, mutual deployments, and trust built over years of defending America together. These weren't digital contacts you could export and import. These were relationships that existed in the honor code between veterans, in the trust that developed when someone's word meant something. I cleared my desk slowly, methodically. Personal photos first, my Air Force commissioning ceremony, my squadron reunion from last year. Then the meaningful stuff, commendations, thank you letters, the bourbon I kept for celebrating successful contracts. Rachel Bennett, my assistant, appeared in the doorway looking like she'd seen a ghost. "Maxwell, is this really happening? Please tell me this is some kind of misunderstanding." "It's happening, Rachel," I said, securing my contact files with the care you'd use to handle classified intelligence. But don't worry about the Morgan meeting tomorrow. I'm sure Jordan can handle it. He's got enterprise cloud systems, right? The sarcasm felt good, but it couldn't mask the bigger picture. Jordan had just fired the only person in the company who understood what the Morgan deal actually meant. "What about the legacy clauses?" Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The veteran employment guarantees, the classified technology transfer protocols. Nobody else knows about the personal commitments we made to preserve his military-developed systems." I shrugged, continuing to pack. "I'm sure it's all in the digital files somewhere." Of course it wasn't. The real deal, the emotional core of why Piers Morgan was selling, existed only in conversations I'd had with him over coffee at the Pentagon and walks around Arlington Cemetery. The stories about building satellite communication systems that saved lives in Iraq, the pride in creating technology that kept America safe for 30 years, the worry about finding a buyer who wouldn't just strip out the military heritage and turn it into another faceless tech acquisition. That stuff doesn't get entered into CRM systems. It lives in trust between people who understand that some things matter more than quarterly profit reports. I walked out past the security checkpoint where Hunter Stone, federal security officer, was waiting with two uncomfortable-looking guards. Hunter had cleared me for access for 15 years, had seen me work classified projects that kept America safe. "Sorry about this, Maxwell," he mumbled, clearly embarrassed. "Orders from corporate." Jordan was standing by the elevators with his arms crossed, trying to look important and decisive. "Make sure he doesn't take any proprietary data," he told Hunter. "He's clean, Mr. Hayes," Hunter said without even checking my briefcase. He knew me. He trusted me. Two things Jordan would never understand. I stopped in front of Jordan and smiled. Not a bitter smile or a threatening one. A genuine smile, the kind you give someone who has unknowingly just handed you a winning lottery ticket while thinking they're giving you a parking fine. "Jordan, good luck with the Morgan meeting tomorrow," I said. "Just remember, his technology was developed during Operation Enduring Freedom. He values service, sacrifice, and keeping your word to fellow veterans. I'm sure you'll do fine." His brow furrowed. Something in my tone made him nervous, but he couldn't quite figure out what. The elevator doors closed on his confused face, and I rode down 15 floors, thinking about everything that was about to change. Not just for me, but for Blackstone Defense Solutions, for General Morgan, and especially for Jordan Hayes. I walked 2 blocks to Murphy's Pub, ordered a double Jameson, and sat in a corner booth to process what had just happened. 25 years of building something real, and it ended because a kid with a computer science degree didn't understand the difference between data and relationships. That's when I made the call that would change everything. I sat there for 45 minutes nursing that double Jameson and letting everything sink in. The whiskey burned, but not as much as the humiliation of being escorted out like some kind of security risk. 25 years of service and loyalty, and it ended because some kid didn't understand that real defense relationships can't be digitized. But here's the thing about military experience. You learn to see the strategic picture. Jordan Hayes thought he'd just flexed his authority and shown everyone who was boss. What he'd actually done was hand me the keys to the most spectacular revenge and defense contracting history. See, there was something Jordan didn't know about my relationship with Piers Morgan, something that wasn't in any digital file or corporate database. We'd served in the same theater during Operation Iraqi Freedom. My squadron had provided air support for his procurement missions. When Piers decided to sell, he'd specifically requested me as the liaison, not Blackstone Defense Solutions, me personally. That distinction was about to become very important. I pulled out my personal phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Not his office number, not his corporate line, but the secure military extension he carried in his uniform pocket. "Morgan Defense Technologies. This is Piers. General Morgan, it's Maxwell Rivers." "Maxwell, good to hear from you. I wasn't expecting to call until tomorrow morning to confirm our meeting. Everything still on track?" "Sir, we need to talk. There's been a development." The warmth in his voice immediately shifted to that sharp, focused attention that made Piers Morgan one of the most successful defense contractors in Virginia. "What kind of development? I've been terminated." Silence long enough that I thought the call had dropped. When he spoke again, his voice was ice cold. "Terminated by whom?" "The VP's son, Jordan Hayes. 25 years old, fresh out of MIT. Some disagreement. Some about security protocols and classified contact management. And who's handling our transaction now? Jordan Hayes. He thinks your military-developed satellite technology is outdated legacy hardware that needs to be digitized and cloud-optimized. Another pause. This one felt dangerous. He thinks what exactly? According to him, traditional military relationships are security vulnerabilities. Everything should be data-driven and enterprise-managed. He fired me for refusing to transfer my classified contacts to their corporate system. I could hear Pierce breathing on the other end. When you've served with someone, you learn to read their silences. This wasn't confusion. This was controlled military fury. Maxwell, are you free for dinner tonight? I'm unemployed, General. I'm free all week. Good. Meet me at the Army-Navy Club at 1900 hours. And Maxwell? Yes, sir. Don't sign anything with those people. Not a severance package, not a non-disclosure agreement, nothing. Wouldn't dream of it, sir. I hung up and ordered another whiskey. This one tasted like victory. That evening, I walked into the Army-Navy Club wearing my best dress uniform and the service ribbons I'd earned in Iraq. The Army-Navy Club wasn't just a restaurant, it was hallowed ground. Oak paneling, leather chairs that had seen a century of strategic decisions, and the kind of discreet service that made military leaders feel comfortable discussing classified matters. Pierce Morgan was waiting in the library, holding 2 glasses of bourbon that probably cost more than most people's car payments. He looked exactly like central casting would order for a successful general-turned-defense contractor. Silver hair, weathered hands, and eyes that had seen America's enemies twice. "Maxwell," he said, standing to shake my hand with proper military bearing. "You look good for an unemployed veteran." "Thank you, General. Good training and stubborn pride." We settled into leather chairs that were probably older than both of us combined. The bourbon was Pappy Van Winkle 23 year, which told me this wasn't just a social dinner. "Tell me exactly what happened," Pierce said. I walked him through the whole thing. Jordan's demands about digitizing everything, his complete disrespect for military service relationships, the public firing. Pierce listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or taking a sip of bourbon. "This Jordan character called my office this afternoon," Pierce said when I finished. "Told my assistant that you were unavailable due to a family emergency, but that he was fully briefed on our arrangement and ready to proceed." I nearly choked on my drink. A family emergency? That was my reaction. See, if you're having a family crisis, we can delay the closing, show some human decency, but if you've been fired, he let that hang in the air. That triggers the key personnel clause, I finished. Exactly. So this boy is either incompetent or dishonest, possibly both. Pierce reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick document. "Which brings me to why I asked you here." He handed me the papers. It wasn't an employment agreement. It was a partnership proposal. Morgan Defense Technologies is looking for a new VP of Strategic Relations. The salary is $320,000 annually, exactly double what you were making. Equity participation in all deals, full benefits, and a signing bonus that should make up for any lost retirement contributions. I read through the contract carefully. It was comprehensive, generous, and completely legitimate. "The first assignment," Pierce continued, "is finding a buyer for our satellite technology division. But obviously not Blackstone Defense Solutions. They've disqualified themselves through their own incompetence." "What about tomorrow's meeting?" Pierce smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. "Oh, I'm still taking that meeting. I want to see this Jordan character try to explain our relationship. I want to watch him realize that he fired Shaish, the only person who could have saved his deal. And after that, you and I find a real defense company to buy the technology. One that understands the value of military relationships and treats veteran professionals with respect." I looked at the contract again. It was more than just a job offer. It was vindication. It was proof that experience and military service still mattered in a world increasingly dominated by kids with degrees and no actual honor. "I accept," I said. "Outstanding." Pierce raised his glass. "To new partnerships and old-fashioned military justice." We finished our bourbon and spent another hour discussing strategy. By the time I left the Army-Navy Club, the trap was set. All that remained was watching it spring shut. The meeting was scheduled for 1000 hours Wednesday morning. At 0945, I walked into the lobby of Blackstone Defense Solutions wearing my new Morgan Defense Technologies Company ID and my most expensive suit. I didn't hide in some corner. I stood right there by the security desk in plain sight, like a ghost returning to haunt the living. The lobby buzzed with its usual morning energy, defense contractors rushing to meetings, assistants juggling classified communications, the familiar chaos of a company that moved hundreds of millions in national security contracts around like chess pieces. I watched it all with the detached amusement of someone who was no longer part of the machine. Hunter Stone spotted me first. His eyes went wide, then he quickly looked away, trying not to draw attention. Smart man. He understood operational security. At 0958, Jordan Hayes came rushing down from the 15th floor, looking frantic. His expensive suit was wrinkled, there was sweat on his forehead, and he had the desperate look of someone who'd spent the last 18 hours trying to figure out how to fake expertise he didn't possess. The confrontation was about to begin. He saw me immediately. "What the hell are you doing here?" he shouted. Across the marble lobby, his voice echoing off the walls, every conversation stopped. 50 people turned to watch the show. "I'm here for the Morgan meeting," I said calmly. "You don't work here anymore. You're absolutely right. I work for Morgan Defense Technologies now." The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might need medical attention. Victor Crane, the CFO, appeared behind him, looking confused and increasingly panicked. "What's going on here?" Crane demanded. "Maxwell works for the client now," Jordan stammered, his voice cracking. "This has to be some kind of corporate espionage. This is sabotage." "Sabotage?" I laughed. "Jordan, you fired me for refusing to compromise classified security protocols. I found new employment. That's called the free market. That's when General Pierce Morgan walked through the revolving doors. The man had command presence. At 65, he moved with the confidence of someone who'd defended America for 30 years and wasn't intimidated by corporate politics. He wore a perfectly tailored Navy suit, traditional military bearing, and an expression that suggested he was here to settle accounts. He looked around the lobby slowly, taking in the scene. Jordan sweating in his designer clothes, Crane panicking in his $3,000 suit, me standing calm and professional by the security desk wearing my new company badge. "Gentlemen," Pierce said, his voice carrying across the marble like a commanding officer calling formation. "I believe we have a meeting scheduled." Jordan stepped forward, trying to compose himself. "General Morgan, there's been some confusion about staffing changes. Maxwell Rivers no longer represents Blackstone Defense Solutions in any capacity." "I'm aware," Pierce said, his eyes never leaving Jordan's face. "He represents me now." The silence was absolute. You could hear the air conditioning, the distant hum of elevators, even the traffic outside. But nobody in that lobby was breathing. Crane tried to salvage something from the wreckage. "General Morgan, please, this is clearly a misunderstanding. We can bring Maxwell back immediately. Full reinstatement, promotion, whatever compensation package he requires." Pierce looked at me with raised eyebrows. "Maxwell, are you interested in returning to Blackstone Defense Solutions?" I smiled. "No, sir. I'm quite satisfied with my new position. Better pay, better benefits, and most importantly, better leadership that respects military service." Pierce nodded approvingly. "Then there's no one here I trust to handle this transaction." He turned toward the door, then stopped and looked back at Jordan. "Young man, you called my office yesterday and misrepresented Maxwell's status. You told my staff he was unavailable due to a family emergency. That was either incompetence or dishonesty. I don't do business with companies that employ either." Jordan's mouth opened and closed like he was drowning. "But the contract, the terms were agreed to. We have a binding letter of intent." "Letters of intent are contingent on due diligence and good faith dealing," Pierce said coldly. "You've demonstrated neither. Good day, gentlemen." He walked out. I followed him, leaving behind 25 years of my life and an $800 million deal that had just evaporated in the most expensive temper tantrum in defense contracting history. In Pierce's car, he chuckled. That was even more satisfying than I expected. Did you see the boy's face when he realized what he'd done? "Hard to miss, General. What happens now? Now we find a real defense company to buy the technology, one that values military experience and treats veteran professionals with respect." The aftermath was swift and brutal. By noon, Blackstone's stock had dropped 12%. By close of business, it was down 23%. The defense industry media picked up the story by Thursday morning. Failed leadership costs. Blackstone $800 million deal. The board called an emergency meeting Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, Jordan Hayes' father had been demoted from VP of Operations to a regional manager position. Jordan himself was quietly let go with a non-disclosure agreement that basically paid him to disappear and never discuss what happened. They tried everything to salvage the deal, called Pierce's office dozens of times, offered massive concessions, even flew a delegation to his Virginia facility to meet with him personally. Pierce refused to take their calls. When they showed up at his office uninvited, his security team escorted them off federal property. Meanwhile, Pierce and I got to work finding a real buyer. We reached out to companies that understood military heritage and valued veteran expertise. Companies where experience mattered more than disruption, where handshake deals still meant something. 4 months later, we sold Morgan's satellite technology division to Raytheon Defense Systems. They understood what Pierce had built. They respected the military applications. They guaranteed employment for all 200 veteran employees. Most importantly, they valued the relationships that came with the technology, the Pentagon contacts, the field-tested applications, the trust built over decades of successful deployments. Final sale price, $900 million to $100 million more than Blackstone had offered. As for me, I'm doing just fine. My new office has a view of the Potomac River, a fully stocked bourbon cabinet, and walls lined with commendations from clients who appreciate that some things can't be digitized. My contact network is stronger than ever, full of people who understand that real defense business happens between Americans who've served their country, not computer systems. Last month, I got a Christmas card from Rachel Bennett. She found a new position at a company that values experience over innovation theater. Hunter Stone retired with full federal benefits and a pension he'd earned through decades of faithful service. Victor Crane landed on his feet at another defense firm, probably grateful to never deal with entitled executives' children again. Jordan Hayes? Last I heard, he was working for a tech startup in Seattle, probably trying to disrupt something that doesn't need disrupting. His security clearance application was denied due to concerns about judgment and discretion in handling sensitive information. Turns out lying to Pentagon generals about key personnel has consequences in the defense world. His father never recovered from the demotion. The board blamed him for his son's catastrophic judgment, and he quietly resigned 6 months later. Sometimes the sins of the children do visit the fathers. Pierce Morgan is enjoying his retirement, but he still calls me every few weeks to check in. You know what the best part was? He told me over bourbon last month. That kid thought he could treat a veteran like disposable inventory. He learned that some people fight back. Sometimes the old ways really are the best ways. Sometimes military honor matters more than technological innovation. Sometimes respect earned through service trumps authority granted through nepotism. And sometimes, if you're patient and play your cards right, justice finds its target with military precision. The defense industry is built on trust, forged through shared service and maintained through mutual respect. Jordan Hayes thought he could digitize that. He learned the hard way that some things are bigger than algorithms. That's my story. Hope it was worth the telling. In a world racing toward digital everything, the most valuable currency is still the one thing technology can't replicate: genuine human trust earned through shared sacrifice and mutual respect. They teach you in business school to disrupt and innovate, but some foundations were built to last. And when you try to demolish what veterans built with their honor, don't be surprised when that foundation becomes your graveyard.